The dog didn't move at first, not when the breeze lifted the corner of the blue top, not when the second shot echoed off the ridge, sharp and final, not even when her name Maggie was called in that trembling way. Only someone who already believes the worst might speak. There was blood drying on her chest fur, the darker kind that only comes from inside. Her breathing was shallow, like a whisper against the dust. Behind her, the edge of the clearing dipped into cedar and pine, a steep drop where birds didn't sing and even the air carried a hush. It had taken all her strength to get this far. Nora stood maybe 10 feet away, just past the old water trough, hands loose at her sides, boots sunk into the soil. She didn't cry. That had come earlier when she'd first seen the blood trail, when the men in the orange vests muttered "not gonna make it" and didn't meet her eyes. Now she just watched, like she had when Maggie was born 12 winters ago in a barn still smelling of warm milk and hay. She had seen animals come into the world and leave it too, but never like this. Never with silence thick enough to muffle even the rustle of wind. The other dogs had been loaded into the truck. Crate doors slammed. Metal clanged. But Maggie had broken the line and run. No one had expected her to make it more than a mile, let alone scale the slope alone with a punctured lung. No one except Nora, who had said nothing, just waited. In the clearing where the two of them used to walk, her boots made no sound as she stepped closer. She knelt slowly, not because of age, though her knees reminded her, but out of reverence, the kind you give to something that's still deciding whether to stay or go. Maggie's eyes were half-lidded. Her paw twitched once. "You stubborn girl," Nora whispered. It wasn't meant to reach anyone else. But the trees heard it. The light between their branches turned amber and thin. A squirrel flicked through the brush but paused, sensing something foreign in the stillness. Even the insects held their rhythm. And then she said it, barely louder. Then breath, come back, just that. No promise, no pleading. As if she knew something deeper than science. As if she wasn't speaking to muscle and bone and organs failing quietly under fur, but to whatever small spark had held them together this long. The wind answered first, drawing a dry leaf across the path. Then Maggie's nostrils flared, her paw shifted again, this time more deliberate, not a spasm, not reflex. She blinked, once, slowly, and turned her head, the kind of movement that shouldn't be possible after a wound like that. The kind of movement that makes a person go still inside their chest. Nora didn't speak again. She didn't reach out. She waited. The next sound came from behind them, a rustling in the underbrush. Quick, purposeful. Someone else was coming. Another ranger maybe. One of the neighbors. But Nora didn't turn. Her gaze was locked on Maggie, who had begun to breathe deeper now, each inhale pulling harder, as if memory itself could resurrect the body. But it wasn't memory. It wasn't instinct either. Maggie was dying, had been for nearly 20 minutes. Everyone else had accepted it, except the one person who had whispered a different outcome. Then now the moment stretched. The rustling stopped. Nora looked up slowly and froze. There, just at the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the shadow of the pines, stood another dog. Larger, younger, broad shoulders under a dark wet coat, its eyes fixed on Nora, then flicked to Maggie. It didn't bark, didn't growl, just watched. Nora knew every dog in these hills. None of them looked like this one, and something in its posture, not fear, not aggression, but a kind of presence, made her rise to her feet without knowing why. Maggie let out a sound then, a low, gravelly exhale. Her tail thumped weakly against the dirt once the strange dog stepped forward. It was limping, its left front leg dragged slightly, leaving a wet mark on the pine needles, and as it moved into the light, Nora saw something that made her chest tighten. Around its neck was Maggie's old leather collar, the one she had buried 2 years ago, after a flood took their shed, the same worn notch by the buckle, same initials carved by hand. But Maggie had never worn it since. The new dog paused again, just beside the log that marked the old trailhead. Its eyes never left hers. Nora didn't move. She didn't understand what she was looking at. Not fully. The clearing was too quiet, the world too soft around the edges, and Maggie, broken and bleeding, raised her head just enough to see it too. Then she closed her eyes, as if she understood something. Nora did in single quotes, as if something had come back. Just not in the way anyone expected. And the forest held its breath. The forest held its breath. The strange dog didn't blink. Its eyes were darker now in the shifting light, nearly black, not with malice, but depth, as if it had been watching longer than Nora knew. Behind it, the shadows stretched toward the clearing, thin as ink, pulled long by the slant of the sun. The world seemed to hush around them. No birdsong, no breeze, only the soft, rhythmic wheeze of Maggie's breath from the ground. And then the dog stepped forward again, not fast, not cautious, almost like it had been here before. Maggie stirred. Her head moved fractionally, her ear twitching toward the sound of the paws brushing leaves. Her chest rose, fell, then rose again with more effort. Nora took a slow step back, not from fear, but reverence. She didn't know what this was, only that it wasn't ordinary. The dog crossed into the clearing fully now. Its coat was ragged in places, bits of matted fur, dried river mud, burrs tangled along the ribs. A survivor, but not wild. There was something in its posture, focused, alert, but not defensive. It looked from Maggie to Nora and back, then sat, just sat, still, close enough to touch the edge of Maggie's outstretched paw. Nora finally found her voice. "Where did you come from?" she asked, but it wasn't a real question. Her words felt absurd in the face of whatever this was. Language belonged to people. Whatever was happening now belonged to something older. A low groan escaped Maggie's throat, not pain exactly, more a sound of recognition, the kind she used to make when she saw her leash in Nora's hand, or when she smelled deer on the wind, and knew she wouldn't be allowed to chase. The strange dog didn't respond, just sat, ears half-raised, tail curled softly around its side. But its eyes never left Maggie. That's when Nora noticed it, the way the dog leaned, barely perceptible, just forward enough that its chest and Maggie's met, fur to fur. Not pressure, not contact, just nearness, like an anchor. A breeze moved through then, the first in minutes. It rolled down from the ridge, carrying the dry, resinous scent of cedar and the faint, sick-sweet trace of old blood. Nora caught herself, holding her breath. It was the kind of wind that often preceded a change, storm, death, or something else you couldn't name until it had already happened. In the distance, an engine turned over. The other rangers, probably circling back, checking on her if they saw the dog, they'd call it in. Tag it, maybe worse. No caller meant no record. No record meant no mercy. And Maggie was already considered a loss. They'd written her off. Only Nora had stayed. But now she wasn't sure who she'd stayed for. The strange dog blinked once, slow and then gently, impossibly laid its muzzle across Maggie's paw. Maggie's breathing shifted again, less labored now, still shallow, but rhythmic. A pulse, faint but steady, tapped along the soft hollow of her neck. The sun dipped behind the ridge, light bled out of the clearing. Nora crouched again, her knees aching, and reached for Maggie, stopped halfway. She didn't want to interrupt. Whatever this was, there was something sacred in it, not in the religious sense, something older. Older than names, older than commands, she whispered. "I don't understand," to no one in particular, and the dog the other one lifted its head. It looked at her for the first time directly, and Nora felt something inside her chest shift. Not break, not fill. Shift. Like an old door easing open somewhere inside her. It wasn't recognition, not fully, but something close, familiar, belonging. She couldn't explain it. Only that the moment she met that gaze, she felt suddenly visible, not as a woman with blood on her jeans and mud on her sleeves, but as someone who had waited so long for something she couldn't name to return. A twig snapped behind them, too sharp to be wind, too close to ignore. The strange dog turned, its head sharply, ears flicked high. Nora stood slowly, shielding Maggie out of instinct. A shape moved in the trees. Then a voice, male, uncertain, not yet close. "Nora, you still up there?" The dog stood now, not alarmed but watchful. Its hackles didn't rise, its body didn't tense, it just waited, like it knew the line between seen and unseen had narrowed, and that it would need to decide which side to stand on. Another step from the trees, another voice, this one closer. "There's something in the clearing." The dog stepped back from Maggie. One step, then another. Its eyes didn't leave Nora's. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, it turned and vanished into the trees with barely a sound, as if the forest had opened just for it, then closed again, and Maggie, eyes still closed, let out a sigh so human in shape that Nora's throat caught. She knelt beside her again. The collar, the one from the strange dog, lay on the ground. Beside them she hadn't seen it fall, and no one had touched it. Behind her the bushes rustled. The voices drew closer, but she didn't move. Her fingers brushed the leather. Still warm, still damped, and in that moment, as the light truly died from the clearing, something in her changed. A question formed, not of where the dog had gone, but whether it had ever really been a dog at all. The forest held its breath. The strange dog didn't move. Its wet coat caught the dying light, dark and slick, the collar around its neck clinging like something half-remembered from a dream. Maggie remained still except for the flicker of her ribcage, shallow, steady, defying reason. Nora stepped forward once. The leaves crackled under her boot, soft and deliberate. She wasn't sure if it was to protect Maggie or to get a better look at the dog, now watching them both with a gaze that felt older than its eyes. Then it turned. Without a sound, it moved back into the trees, not with the speed of an animal fleeing, but with the calm certainty of something guiding. Its limp was clearer now. Whatever wound it carried had dried but not healed, and still, it pressed on, brushing through pine and fern as if leading a procession only it could understand. Maggie's tail moved again. It was barely visible, but Nora saw it, a tremor of recognition, and something else, not longing, not fear, obedience. Then came the scent, faint but unmistakable. Fire. It wasn't close, not yet, but in these woods, scent traveled ahead of truth. Somewhere east, maybe beyond the ridge, something had kindled, whether from lightning, carelessness, or the quiet cruelty of heat and wind. She didn't know, but it meant time, and Maggie didn't have much. Still kneeling beside her, Nora reached toward the dog's neck, brushing gently through the thinning fur. Maggie flinched, not from pain, from refusal. Her eyes met Nora's with something that didn't ask for rescue. It asked for trust. She wants to follow, Nora said aloud, though no one was there to hear. And yet, saying it made it real. She sat back on her heels, breath uneven. For years, Maggie had followed her through long winters, over streams turned to stone with ice, through dusk patrols and barn berths, through silence and loss, through the day Nora's brother hadn't returned from that ridge, the one they weren't supposed to climb, the one Maggie never went near afterward. And now, when everything in her wanted to carry Maggie home, she felt something else pressing at her ribs, not grief. Permission. The collar. That was the part she couldn't make sense of. It wasn't just a copy. It was the collar, the notches, the soft wear at the bend. It bore the bite mark from when Maggie chewed at it the summer Nora had to leave for 2 weeks. She had buried it behind the shed when she thought letting go meant starting over. So how was it here? Another breath of wind passed through the trees. It didn't feel like warning. It felt like memory being stirred loose. A soft scrape behind her made Nora turn. Maggie was trying to rise. Her paws trembled, back legs folding underneath her, but she planted one foot forward, not out of desperation, with purpose. Nora moved to steady her, but Maggie held her eyes and growled once, low and faint, just enough to say, "No, not here." The forest had shifted, not louder, not darker, but aware. Maggie rose another inch, then another. Her ribs strained. Blood matted against her shoulder. But she stood, then took one step, then another, toward the trees, toward the trail the strange dog had taken. Nora followed, but slowly, staying just behind, not guiding, witnessing. They passed the log, the one she and her brother had once carved names into. It was barely visible now, eaten by moss and time, but still it marked something sacred. The wind turned again, drier now. The fire was real. But Maggie didn't slow. Her path curved toward a narrow, deer trail she hadn't walked in years, one that led to the overlook Nora's breath caught. The overlook was where her brother had last been seen, and where Maggie had once refused to step. But now she walked as if called, and in the underbrush ahead, just at the edge of light, a shape moved again. The strange dog, waiting. Maggie hesitated. One breath. Two. And then she turned, not to look at the dog, but back at Nora. Her eyes were clear. They didn't say goodbye. They said, "You don't need to follow." And Nora understood. Maggie took one more step, then vanished into the trees. The clearing emptied. The last sound was the faint crunch of pine needles under slow, deliberate paws. Nora stood there, unmoving. The air shifted again, warm now from the east. A dull orange hue began to pulse low against the horizon. But before it rose, there came a new sound, not barking, not whining, a howl. Low, mournful, but not of pain, of returning. Nora closed her eyes. In sorrow, in awe, the forest held its breath. Nora didn't speak. She didn't dare. One wrong sound, and the moment might shatter, whatever it was. The younger dog stood still, just behind the log, the worn collar resting like a question around its neck. Maggie lay motionless now, her eyes closed again, but her chest continued to rise and fall, each breath steadier than the last, though she hadn't moved since the shadow had emerged. A single pine needle spiraled down between them, catching the light before settling silently in the dirt. The stranger tilted its head, just slightly, as if weighing something. Its ears flicked toward the right, not at Nora, but deeper into the woods. That was when Nora heard it too. A sound barely there, a branch shifting, a footstep, maybe not. The kind of sound you don't notice unless everything else is still. She turned her head toward the tree line. The slope dipped there, steep and mossy. Old bear tracks had been spotted last winter, but those paths were usually empty by June. Still, she felt her spine stiffen. This clearing was never meant to be shared with this many eyes. The young dog didn't retreat, but it didn't come closer either. Its body remained taut, not with fear, but with alertness. Its gaze shifted between the trees and Maggie, back and forth, a choice unfolding. Maggie let out a breath again, this time longer. It sounded almost like relief, and suddenly Nora understood something she hadn't until now. This dog, this creature that wore the past like a skin it hadn't earned, wasn't here to hurt. It had been watching, not for her, not for help, but for permission. As if Maggie's struggle up that hill, through blood and pain, hadn't been to escape, but to reach this meeting that defied logic. This impossible echo of another time. Then the wind picked up, just a touch stronger now, combing through the grass in low sweeping strokes. It rustled Maggie's fur, and with that, she stirred, her paw shifting, her head rolling slightly toward the sound. The dog responded instantly. It stepped over the log, careful and deliberate, each footfall soundless, not toward Nora, but directly to Maggie. It paused, a single pace away, lowered its head, waited. Nora didn't move. Maggie opened her eyes. They didn't widen, no surprise, just a calm sort of recognition, as though she'd known the whole time this was what was coming, not death, not comfort, but a reckoning. Then something Nora hadn't expected. Maggie growled, soft, weak, but clear. The younger dog didn't react with aggression. It stepped back, sat, its ears lowered. Maggie's tail gave one small twitch, then stopped again. Whatever passed between them in that moment wasn't human. Nora felt it but couldn't name it, like watching two currents meet under the surface of a river. You don't see the shift, but you feel it in the water's pool. And suddenly Nora realized this wasn't over. There was still something out there. The sound in the woods, the movement, the trail that hadn't grown cold. She turned her head, slowly scanning the slope. Nothing but trees in fading daylight. But the birds hadn't returned. The squirrel had vanished. Even the flies seemed quiet. A dot, she whispered without looking away. You didn't come alone, did you? Behind her, Maggie made a sound, almost a cough, but deeper. A rough bark caught halfway in her throat. The younger dog rose. It turned toward the trees, then froze. Nora followed its gaze and saw it half hidden between two trunks. A third shape still watching, broad shoulders, barely visible, eyes that caught the dusk like glass. Another dog. Larger. No collar, no movement, just presence. And for the first time, Nora felt something old stir in her chest. Not fear, not dread, but the feeling that something had been building under her feet long before she arrived. The younger dog didn't retreat, but Maggie whimpered, and Nora knew, whatever this was, it had history. Something was being answered, but not fully. The silence thickened again, and the trees closed in. The larger dog didn't move. It stood just beyond the trees, half swallowed by the dusk, its breath a slow rhythm beneath the hush. Not aggressive, not fearful, just there like a stone left long in place, shaped by weather and time. The younger one glanced back at Maggie, then returned its gaze to the shadow in the woods. No bark, no signal, and yet something passed between them, a silent permission. Maggie shifted again. Her body trembled with the effort, but she lifted her head and gave a low whine, short and sharp. Not pain, something else, recognition. The older dog stepped forward, only a few paces. His eyes never left her. Nora didn't move. Her breath came slow and steady now, like the wind that moved down the hill in quiet sighs. She felt the heaviness in her limbs, not from fear but from the weight of understanding, of witnessing something that didn't belong to her and yet somehow did 12 years ago. Before the floods and the fires and the long stretch of silence, Maggie had a litter. All but one had been taken to farms or shelters. The last pup, the one they couldn't place, had disappeared the day after a thunderstorm cracked the barn roof and shattered a jar of feed against the stall. Nora had searched for days, called his name into the trees, found only Pup at the edge of the creek. She never spoke of it again, until now. Now she saw it, not in certainty, but in movement. The way the large dog tilted his head, the way Maggie's eyes followed him, the way he lowered himself slowly onto his front legs, not as a threat, but in reverence, like a son returning to sit beside his mother. Nora stepped back. She knelt and rested one hand on Maggie's side. Her ribs moved under the touch, shallow but calm. The old dog didn't lift her head again. She simply breathed, and beside her, the two figures, one younger, one scarred by age, sat in silence. The wind shifted again. A few pine needles danced in the air before settling softly into the grass. The sky above the ridge had turned the color of old copper, and a thin line of birds passed across it, not hurried, not lost. For a long while, no one moved. Then, slowly, Maggie let out a final breath, long, even unbroken. Her chest rose, once more, then didn't again. The younger dog didn't whimper. The larger one didn't howl. They just remained still. Nora closed her eyes. There was no cry, no ceremony, only the weight of stillness, and the soft touch of fur cooling beneath her hand. She stayed that way for a while, knees pressing into the earth, her palm on Maggie's side, the wind curling her hair around her cheek. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once. Then again, when she finally stood, her joints stiff. The two dogs had not moved. She didn't speak. She only gave a single nod, almost imperceptible, to the forest, to whatever lived in it, returned from it, or had never left. Then she walked back down the trail alone. At the edge of the clearing, she paused and turned. The older dog now stood beside Maggie's body, head bowed, eyes closed. The younger one remained seated, not facing the trees anymore, but watching her. And for a moment, just one, she thought he might follow, but he didn't. He turned and pressed his nose into Maggie's fur, and the wind picked up once more. It carried the scent of cedar and soil, of endings and of earth, of something returned, not as it was, but in the shape it had to become. Back down the trail, Nora stepped into the tall grass. Her boots left shallow prints in the soft ground, but the wind soon brushed them smooth. By the time the sun slipped fully behind the ridge, there was nothing left but shadow, and a faint, steady rhythm in the branches, like breathing.